The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. This is our first ever show I'm in our new studio. So we had some great programming that we showed you guys the last couple of weeks that we had pre-taped from before. But this is the first one. This is our maiden voyage. I'm here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Good morning, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Good morning, Shannon, and good morning, Chris.
So excited to be back and to be here with you guys. So much has happened in the last couple of weeks. We're going to talk a little bit about some of it. But obviously the main reason for being here is that Dr. Granpeesheh is here. And we like to ask Dr. Doreen. She is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for, I run out of, it's 40 million years. And, which is unbelievable because you don't look like it. But I love today's show because so many people have been asking me questions about you. Especially this last week because a program aired on HBO called The Rehearsal, and you were featured in an episode of it, and people have been talking and saying wonderful things about you and asking all kinds of questions. I said I've had more questions about you as a person and about your views on autism in the last week than I have in the previous 15 years, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Sure, that's funny.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to let everybody know that it's amazing that we have this time with Dr. Granpeesheh because of her level of expertise. She's been working in this field, as I said, for 40 years. And she has a unique voice in this community that she has been so pro the individual. And so I just love your beautiful perspective taking always, Dr. Granpeesheh. But you have this ability to see around corners. You've been through so many different changes in the autism community and the way services are provided and the funding for those services has just been amazing. So I want to encourage all of you. We are live right now today. What is the date? So 3rd of June. So the chat is open. You guys can be sending in questions about absolutely anything. But we do have a couple of starter questions for the topic that you guys can be writing in. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. Chris, the fabulous Chris, who's working in major miracles on a daily basis, is going to be showing you some of the different ways that you can connect to the show. We hope that you check out our 2 very robust YouTube channels, Ask Dr. Doreen and Autism Live. But we also hope that you know that the lion's share of you listen in podcast. So you can download the podcast on any platform that you're on. It's a free download. It will come with advertisements. I hope that you embrace that like we do. That's how we make it free for you. If that's not ideal for you, please go to glow.fm/autismlive. When you go there for just $5 a month, you can subscribe to everything that we do at the Autism Network, including Ask Dr. Doreen. It will show up in your inbox every time we do a new show, and it will be ad-free. So that's a pretty amazing thing. $5 a month, can't beat that. Okay, the chat is now open. I barely let you speak, but I guess one of the questions, maybe we should start with that. One of the questions was, what was it like filming for The Rehearsal? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about, for people who haven't yet seen it, why they might want to tune in and watch.
Yeah, great. I can talk about that. So I think I'll start from the beginning because the producers contacted me because there was interest from individuals on the spectrum in the show as a whole, right? So they told me that there were a few articles actually written about this overwhelming interest of people, autistic people who had said this show really resonates with me. And they were asking me why I think that is. And of course, I've followed Nathan Fielder for a while. I've seen his previous show, Nathan For You. And because, as you know, Shannon, my son is a screenwriter, but also loves comedy.
Yeah.
And so he has gotten me into Nathan For You when it came out years ago. And so I was very familiar with his work, and I had already seen the first season of rehearsal as well, and basically told them, well, I think people are interested in this because it is very much like their life, the way that they find so many situations in life don't come naturally to them, that they have to rehearse, right? They have to practice certain things in order to fit in order to be able to, just fit into the society that we live in. And so I guess that's what they were looking for in an answer. And so we have a lot of conversations, and they basically said, could we come to one of your clinics and observe and just kind of get to know what it's like? And I said, sure, and gave them a few options, and they chose one of our clinics. And I have to say, kudos to our operations manager there, Laura Ruiz, who was there the whole day. I believe I'm trying to think, it was during the week, but we had to send all of our patients to home so that they were getting services in home. And it was a massive, massive production. I mean, they had, gosh, I don't even know how many trucks and people, a couple of hundred people. It was pretty big. They took over the building next door, which served as their setup area. I mean, it was a big production. So we spent the day there, and I think that was the day when so Nathan Fielder is really interesting. I think I find him to be an incredibly intelligent person. He's producing and directing and doing pretty much everything all at once. So he does actually have a kind of a laptop that he has around his neck, and he's walking around and he's telling, I think it was 2 or 3 cameramen, kind of, you go there, you do this, he's directing everyone. And really, I think their idea was just to kind of show some aspects of some of the difficulties that individuals with autism experience. And that's why we did the facial recognition or the emotion recognition program on the computer together, because that is obviously a very difficult thing to be able to, and it is one of the areas where autistic people tend to struggle, is being able to read facial expression and be able to understand what that means, right? So we did that. They were there the entire day. We were all there the entire day. We did have, there were a couple of adults who had come who were not card patients. They were very, very well accomplished adults on the spectrum, I have to say. There was a young man there who I met and sat and spoke with him for a long time, and he was just brilliant. He had his doctorate, he had his PhD, and was in the process of getting his MD. And he was just an incredible person, and I sat and spoke with him for a while. So I was a little bit surprised that they were not covered. I guess they kind of didn't fit into the overall theme. Yeah. But I think they spent the whole day. It's all live. There's no script. From the minute you walk in, the entire thing is filmed. So everything is filmed. I had my mic on the whole day. So if I wanted to go for a break, I had to ask them to shut off my mic, that kind of stuff. And so, so all of that is occurring. Now, during that day, he pulled me in, and that is in the rehearsal as well, where he said, I gotta tell you, the show is not about autism, it's about air traffic and the experience of pilots and co-pilots and what happens. And But there's this segue because I'm trying to actually get in with this senator or congressman, someone that I want to try to influence, and he's very interested in autism, and so that's why we're segueing into this. And I said, okay, that's fine. And he said, so what we've done is we've built this set, which is a huge airport set, and where he started to tell me kind of what they were planning to do. And as he was saying this, I just thought, oh my God, there's so many of our kids who would really benefit from being, like, having the opportunity. And that's what I find is so interesting with this, is that to have the opportunity to actually practice at a set that looks exactly like an airport would be amazing, right? For some of our kids who have a fear of going to an airport due to all the sounds and sights and like going through security and all of that. So I told him, wow, you have a set that's a full airport? And he said, yeah. And then we discussed the possibility of our kids being able to access that and actually practice for a day. And I think he was first hesitant, but I think he came around and said, sure. Nothing was discussed that day. They told me, we'll let you know. I actually I thought we would be able to access the set. I didn't think that it would be on a day when they're filming. I just thought we'd have access and a lot of our kids would benefit. So basically then they called me back a little while later and said, we've decided to do a whole day of shooting, and you can bring, I don't remember now, maybe 10 of our patients, took a bunch of patients and their therapists, and some families actually came. And it was amazing because the set is just incredible. I mean, I can't, like, the entire 2 days of experience that I had, I just kept thinking, like, HBO invests a lot into this show, and it's really amazing. And it was a really big hangar. So you would enter, and there was the security section, and we're talking hundreds of actors who are doing everything from the TSA to people. The shops were identical to the airport shops, restaurants. I mean, everything looks just like an airport terminal. So it's pretty crazy. And there were, like, I don't remember now, maybe 4 gates. It looked like sort of, like Burbank Airport or something like that. So we basically just took our kids through security, which in and of itself was a great experience. Took them around to the shops, took them to the restaurants, took them to the gates, that kind of thing. So we were just doing our own thing, and I think they were taping some of that, and it was wonderful. He had actually said to me, it was like we had discussed that some of our kids might get overwhelmed and would need a quiet place. And they had a captain and cook pilot lounge that was a replica of what they had seen before, but it was a very quiet room, and no one was using it. And so they allowed us. He actually came and told me, if you have any of your kids have any problems, just raise your hand, and no matter where I am, I will get everyone to stop. We even practiced this, and he was like further down in the terminal, and one of our kids was just getting a little overwhelmed, and I went like this, and he took his megaphone and just basically said, "Hi, everybody stop," and then he came over and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "We need a quiet space," and we walked over to our quiet space. It was pretty amazing. He was in control, I would say, of like everyone. It was pretty, very, very impressive. And so that was that day, and it was wonderful. And he had wanted to have an association with us. And so I had actually suggested that he would join our board, our Autism Care Today, our board, so that he could, that's a board of individuals who care about autism and help us fundraise. And as you know, Shannon, all of that goes back into helping families.
Yes.
So I had brought him that day, since it was our second day, I had brought him back an invitation. And so he was very happy about that. And hopefully he has agreed to come to our gala this year. So I'm very excited about that. And hopefully we can still make that happen. And yeah, and so that was the whole day. And it's really interesting because honestly, none of it is scripted. It's all just kind of happening as it is. And he pulls the whole thing together, which I think is fascinating.
Well, I love that you are you no matter where you are. And that's like a huge compliment that you are 100% you no matter where you are. And to watch you on the show, you were still you. And I love that you were concerned about, he was talking about one thing, and the minute he started talking about that airplane hangar, I saw you go, oh, this would be amazing for our kids. And I watched you be you, which was really lovely. And I love that he was so respectful because we love to hear that more than anything. So, I thought that this season, I liked it much more than I liked the first season, because the first season, as you know, I got a little squeamish about things. And he brought that up in the conversation too, not about my feelings about it, but there were some of us that got concerned about the kid in the first season. But I also loved the way, I always love the way you look at the world. You see the world in a very specific way. And I think you made him feel better about that. And as a result, you had this amazing thing happen. I thought it was really beautiful. I want to say hi to Michelle Manley and to Alfonso Romero. We're going to attempt to help Alfonso here in just a second, but I think you started to say something, Dr. Granpeesheh.
No, I was just saying thank you. Yeah, it was I wasn't sure how the experience would go because after all, there's some comedy in the whole thing, right? And I wasn't sure which direction it would take, but it was, honestly, there was no prep. We didn't know how I didn't know anything. He did call me about a month ago maybe and said, just heads up, the show's coming out. You guys are very prominently featured, so you might have a lot of press contacting you, but just, just wanted to give you a heads up. And that was it.
Yeah.
And, but I thought it went really well. I was very thankful to him for, showing, I think the key to that show for me was, I think the message he was trying to get across, which was really a beautiful message, is that you can do anything with practice. Right? No matter who you are, you can, if you rehearse something, you can do it right? And a lot of times we rehearse things, but we don't go to the extreme that he does. And maybe it works to go to that extreme. I mean, the fact that the man in 1 year taught himself how to fly and then flew a 737 shows how unbelievable it is, right? You can do anything.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And the fact that he was basically saying, I think he was speaking to everyone, but in particular people with autism, and saying, you can do anything you want as long as you practice it. And so I loved that. That was, I thought, a very good thing.
I was really touched also. I don't want to, spoiler alert for anything, but
I'm kind of given a lot of spoilers.
Well, no, people need to watch that episode. But across the whole season, he had a lot to say about aviation and why, an important piece that's missing. And in the very last episode, there is a message that, I remember 2 years ago, Temple Grandin being on the show and saying that she had changed and was now telling professionals that they should not, no matter what job they were in, that they should no longer disclose their diagnosis because a pilot had lost his job because he disclosed that he had autism. And she said, I'm telling everyone across the board, keep it to yourself, don't tell anybody. And she expressed the grief that she personally had about that, about giving that advice and how wrong she felt the world was. But she said, you can't lose your jobs. So And I felt that Nathan had a pretty important message about that in the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. He did. And, that, I don't know what that test was interesting that they wanted to do, which obviously you can't diagnose autism on a brain scan, but, it was, he was basically saying, I don't really want to know, because he was definitely alluding to the fact that if you have any kind of diagnosis, it could interfere with your job and with you being a pilot. Yeah.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking. And so I thought that was an important message. I do want to acknowledge that Alfonso has written in and asked a question, that I believe, that you want to get in contact with Dr. Granpeesheh. My spoken Spanish is much better in terms of understanding than written. But if anybody wants to get in touch with Dr. Granpeesheh, I will say if you write to me, I will forward it to the people so that you can be in touch. So if you'll put my email on the screen, which is shannon@autism-live.com. Everybody's welcome to write to me whenever, and I forward things to Dr. Granpeesheh's assistant and to her when appropriate. Happy to do that. Okay, we have other questions. That people have been asking me all kinds of questions about you. Mm-hmm. But one of the questions that we got was, what's been the biggest aha moment for Dr. Granpeesheh over the years? Because in all the years that you've been studying and looking at autism, they want to know what was the biggest aha. I don't know, you can pare it down to one, but what do you think?
I don't think I can pare it down to one. I mean, I've learned so much. So much.
Well, the next question was, how has Dr. Granpeesheh's view of autism changed over the years and why? So maybe you can group them together.
Yeah, that's great. So I can kind of maybe bring it all together.
Yeah.
I guess when I first started in this field, I was very young, and the field that was just coming about, which was a good thing, because before we started looking at autism as in terms of behaviors, in terms of symptoms, there was this kind of Bettelheim era, which was sort of a ridiculous era of belief that autism had something to do with cold parenting. And, so we were just coming off of that, because we're talking the 70s is when I got involved with autism, right? And so it was very refreshing, really, to come into a field, which obviously in those days it was just psychology, and that would say, no, it has nothing to do with that. And by the way, these individuals are very intelligent, and they just learn differently, because this whole field of applied behavior analysis, the original name was behavior modification, which is based on learning theory, learning psychology. It's a subsection of psychology, which is learning. And so the whole concept was, no, individuals who are diagnosed can learn. They just learn in a different way than others. And we have to figure out how to teach them that works for them. So that was, I think, the first kind of decade of my life in autism, was like, what are the things we got to do to make learning easier? And, basic things, Shannon, like, how do you simplify instructions so they're not too confusing or too long? And being someone who speaks a few languages, all of this stuff resonated with me, because it was kind of like, oh yeah, when I go to France and people are speaking very, very quickly in French, it's very difficult for me, because there's a lot of just words that are not necessary. And if someone was to speak in short segments or slower, it would be very helpful to me to understanding. So that was it was just honing in on how do we make our instructions better? How do we focus on breaking down skills that need to be taught into their most basic parts, and how do the basis of what is now ABA. So that was the first many years. And as I got involved with people people who had autism, I learned that there's a very strong sensory aspect to this. And of course, that's a very, now coming full circle, because back in the day when I was learning this stuff, so kind of like now we're 80s, nobody was really looking at the concept of sensory issues or sensory dysregulation or the need for certain sensory input or getting overwhelmed by other sensory. Nobody was looking at any of that, right? It was just, if it wasn't the typical, it wasn't okay. And so then I learned a lot about how we, of course, we learn everything through our senses, right? Through our vision and hearing. And if those are functioning differently, I don't really even like to use the word dysregulated. If they're functioning differently, we're going to learn differently. And Shannon, don't let me forget, I want to come back to that because I also just had a amazing lecturer, Dr. Ami Klin at ABAI, and it kind of full circles back to the sensory input and learning. I want to talk about that. So, but anyway, so then I learned a lot about that. And of course, as you know, very early on, and this is all just through my kids, through the kids that I treated, right? Like I had a little boy who just would not pick up instructions, and we found out he is actually very close to being completely deaf. So we were like, oh my gosh, we got to really focus on the sensory. But I had another little boy who could not focus on stimuli that were presented to him because he didn't have the ability to focus both eyes. It's called binocularity on an object. If it was anywhere, I think it was from like the tip of his nose to something like 4 feet out. He couldn't focus. So, I mean, imagine what you see and people trying to teach you stuff and you can't actually see it properly. So a lot of just seeing things from that angle. And then, of course, was the incredible, one of the big lessons for me was the biological stuff that goes unnoticed. So the medical issues. And of course, thanks to my dear late friend, Dr. Bernie Rimland, who really pulled me into, look at the medical aspects of what's going on with each of these children that you treat, pulled me into a different world through what was then the DAN movement. And I kind of got to know a lot of the doctors and learned a little bit more about their world and what they were seeing with their patients. And they were all focused with autism. I was seeing all these kind of like behavioral symptoms and external things and also psychological things, but they were seeing, incredible amounts of inflammation, gut inflammation, kids who were just very, very sick, had very little sleep, had extreme gastrointestinal issues that were being really going unnoticed because everyone was just thinking of autism as a pure mental disorder on no biological basis. So then I started to really learn more about that. And through that world of, oh my gosh, like so many of our kids have medical issues. That was a fascinating period for me because we were working with doctors and we would treat one aspect of a biological illness, like let's say, a child who would have diarrhea 5 times a day. And so we would treat that and we would see that the child is now becoming much more comfortable, much more at ease, much more able to pay attention, learn, listen, etc. Or, a story I often remember is that I had a little girl who you shouldn't have this as a little child, but she had fungus on her nails. And so we treated the fungus with medication for her nails. And her attention changed and her ability to learn changed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is candida. This is affecting her brain. And we really started learning about all the medical issues that cross the blood-brain barrier and actually affect learning and attention and all of that, which by the way, is kind of what's happening to a lot of us right now too. But so then that whole experience then took me into what else is in our environment that is hurting not just these children, but in general, everyone, right? So what are the causes of toxicity in our world? And that was a really big revelation, I think, for me, and I saw it affecting so many of my kids. And I don't know if you remember the whole movement. I think one of the big things people don't realize that autism brought to the world were these diets and how you can eliminate or you should eliminate things that you are not able to process or not able to digest. Casein-free, gluten-free, a lot of that kind of stuff. As you remember, Shannon, maybe I want to say 20 years ago, maybe 30, 20, 25 years ago, you couldn't go to restaurants and say, do you have something gluten-free? That just was a joke. No, you couldn't, in a lot of countries, you couldn't buy anything gluten-free. And it was because of autism. I will always say this. It was because of parents of kids with autism who pushed and pushed and pushed for this, that we now do have products that are gluten-free and casein-free and so on. And that takes you back to why can they not digest gluten and casein and so on. And that takes you back to, like, what is wrong with our wheat products and our cows and all this other stuff, which is a whole other lecture on toxicity in our environment. But basically, those were extremely important lessons, I think, that I learned in terms of how to look at autism and how to treat it. There's so many other things, though, Shannon. I mean, I think I learned about strength from all the moms and the parents, like that, how they would go from just being completely devastated on a day of diagnosis to being warriors and just moving the needle and making things happen for not just their own child, but for thousands of other kids to come in different ways, which is what's always fascinating to me. And I learned that. And of course, during this whole 50 years almost, education changed, the field has changed. Now people go and get their master's or doctoral degree in autism types of specialties in ABA. I mean, when I started in this field, the prevalence was somewhere between 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 15,000. And now, of course, it just became 1 in 31 kids, which is insane. So one has to ask oneself, what is going on? We know there are genetic components to this, but we also know that they're triggered by environmental components, and one has to really look at that. So those are, I guess, some of the main things that I learned. I will say, Shannon, when I came, as you know, I kind of left a little bit. Not that I ever left, but I exited the world of running a big company in autism service provision. I exited more as an ABA world, I would say, because you and I continued forever. But when I came back, which was basically end of 2023, I saw that things have already changed. So the dark side, I guess, is that I've learned that when money becomes an issue, it does affect the quality of treatment. It does affect treatment as a whole. And I'm sad to see that because I think that overall we've lost perspective a little bit. And a lot of things have changed over the last few years. I'm happy to talk about those as well. But they are not things that I would have liked. I'm trying to reverse some of those things in terms of how we look at autism again.
Yeah, I think we do want to hear about that. Stephen has written in and said, hi, everyone. How do you handle the anti-ABA narrative that seems to be so popular?
Good timing. Yeah. That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is a huge middle, syndrome, I guess I would say, spectrum of autism. It's massive. There are individuals on one side who are very, very, very severely affected, right? So that means they have zero communication, even as adults. They're unable to communicate verbally, non-verbally. They're just unable to communicate their needs, unable to express their pains, unable to express, when they're hungry, when they want to go to the bathroom, any of those types of things, much less socialize or all of that. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're talking about individuals who are very minimally affected, and their biggest, area of concern is just the feeling left out, not being able to socially integrate with others. And so as a result of that, they start to experience other types of mental issues like depression and so on. That is a huge difference. And of course, the individuals on this side who are very, very minimally affected have a voice, and certainly should have a voice. And they should be able to say, I don't want people to look at me like, hey, there's something very wrong with me. I learn differently. I struggle with certain things, but then who doesn't? And I want to be accepted the way that I am. And that's honestly perfectly fine. And that's wonderful and should be respected and all that. But sadly, the individuals on this side don't have a voice. They are not able to say what is going on with them. They are not having a high quality of life. And by the way, neither are their entire families. I have hundreds, if not thousands of families who are destroyed because they can't care for the individual in a way that they would like to care for the individual. And parents who are heartbroken because they really come to a place where they're like, I just can't do it anymore. So these individuals don't have that voice, and these individuals do need help. And when you think about the fact that these severely affected individuals can learn to communicate, they can learn to express themselves in ways that are not harmful. Anyone who is not able to communicate is going to get angry. That's just a normal human reaction. And when you're angry, you're going to communicate with aggression. That's just how we all are as humans, right? When you can't express that you want something and no one understands you, you're going to hit to try to get that object. It's just a normal human reaction. But it is possible to learn that that's not a good way to communicate. It's possible to learn to express our needs. It's possible to learn to express how we feel, all of those types of things. And that is very, very important to be said, because as the individuals who want to be accepted voice their concerns and say, hey, we don't want anyone to change who we are, it is affecting this incredible field of teaching, which is ABA, is causing this field to be looked frowned upon and to be looked badly upon. And for people to think, who are these people who are forcing our kids to change their behavior? Guess what? Every teacher on earth who ever taught helped people change their behavior. Go all the way back, go to Helen Keller for an example, but any teacher, what do we learn? We all learn to change our behavior in order to fit into society. We all do, right? This is why when you go to a classroom, you sit down in the classroom and you don't just jump out and say whatever you want. You have to do this behavior. That's the behavior we learn. It's so that we can be part of the society of a classroom, of school. That's just one example of many. When we want things, we will, say, excuse me, could I interrupt that? This is all just learning behavior that we've learned so that we can be part of society. So I don't like the fact that people think ABA is this evil thing. It is not. It's a teaching technique. Let's just be very, very clear about that. Now, the second question becomes, is it appropriate for everyone? It is appropriate for everyone who wants it or who needs it or who benefits from it. just like anything else, like think of any other disorder in the diagnostic manual, right? Let's say you have anxiety, that as a disorder, generalized anxiety, right? By the way, the definition of something that is classified as a disorder is that it would make it difficult for you to otherwise survive in society and thrive. If you have anxiety, but you can cope with it, you don't qualify for a diagnosis of anxiety, generalized anxiety. It only becomes a diagnosis when it really does affect your ongoing life and you are struggling to get by, right? So if you have anxiety and you have a diagnosis because it is so intense that it's causing you to struggle to survive, then you have choices in treatments. You can choose medications, you can choose cognitive behavioral therapy, you can choose lots of different things to meditate, you can do lots of different things that will help you with that anxiety. But it is a choice of what you want to do. ABA happens to be the science that has been the most supported from a perspective of research and literature and success in teaching individuals who have a diagnosis of autism. So it's your choice, either your choice or your guardian or your parents' choice to take advantage of this wonderful intervention that exists. But you shouldn't be like trying to eliminate it because all of these other folks, you may decide that it's not appropriate for you, but I promise you it has helped hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of individuals live a better life. So that's kind of my whole take on that.
Can I just add one log to the fire? Because I just love listening to you talk about this. But I do want to say, and I want to say this as a person who, since we were last here doing the show, my son graduated from college on the dean's list with a degree in screenwriting. And this is a little boy who didn't know what his name was, didn't know how to write his name, didn't know how to hold a pencil for years. And it took a long time and amazing people at CARD under your direction for that to happen for him. And he's a happy, oh my gosh, if you could have seen him graduating from college and knowing that he gets to go into a world and fight to be a screenwriter. I mean, come on. So I'm coming from that space, but I also am coming from a space of somebody who talks to a lot of parents, both CARD parents and parents who've never heard of CARD. And I talk to and have a lot of friends who are self-advocates, adults that are on the spectrum. I hear what they have to say about ABA, and I'm horrified by some of the experiences that they have had that were at the hand of somebody who said they were doing ABA, but had decided that they were going to do things that are not ABA. And I want to make sure that I acknowledge that there's been a lot of trauma, but it's a lot of things that were done that are nowhere in any way, shape, or form ABA. And that in talking to parents, just when I'm almost at the point where I hate going to conferences anymore because parents will start to talk to me and tell me experiences that they've had with ABA with their child. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I also worry about this field that some people had taken it upon themselves to not look at the research, not follow the guidelines, and that there is that out there too. I think it is really important that we all be responsible and do our part to talk about what good ABA looks like and to give people, empower people to ask questions. I think it's so difficult sometimes because people don't know what it looks like, so they don't know what they're seeing when they see it. It's a learning curve. It took me years to learn exactly, what the principles of ABA were, but I was lucky because I was having it done at the very highest level and other people were not as lucky. So I want to constantly empower parents to ask questions, empower clinicians to be asking questions, and for everyone to do what is right. You talk all the time about it has to be fair. I swear I want to make t-shirts, because I feel like if everybody just understood that, it would be a cleaner, better ABA world. But I am terrified sometimes of some of the things that I hear. And I remember when they took us to look at a school, when Jem was 3, they wanted us to go to school, and they said, oh, and we're using ABA in the classroom. And I went in and said, no, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I knew just enough to know that they weren't. But honestly, Dr. Granpeesheh, when I hear clinicians, some of the things that I have heard people say in the last year, I'm just gobsmacked. The one set a panel of clinicians who told me that research showed that 10 hours of ABA was sufficient for a child who was 3.
Yeah.
And I said, no. How can you even say that to me? You have a BCBA. Show me a study that shows that. That doesn't exist. And they really believed that it did. It's horrible.
Yeah. And to kind of follow that train of thought, it is interesting, Shannon, because it goes with what I'm observing, which is that a lot of the BCBAs who are coming out of school right now are not taught that a big part of ABA is skill teaching.
Yes.
The concept that they have is that I only need to teach skills enough to replace challenging behaviors.
Yes.
If you look at it that way, if a child is hitting, and you identify that the function of the hitting is a tangible function, that means they basically hit in order to get an object, then what you need to do is teach them, obviously, to not hit, but to ask for the object in some way. And if you really believe that that's the only thing, that's your job description only has to do with teaching replacement behaviors, then I could see how someone would say, 10 hours is enough. Because you can do that in 10 hours.
Right.
What you can't do is then teach the individual to ask with more detail and not just say, I want juice, but to actually say, I want cranberry juice, please. And next time I'm going to want orange juice because I really don't want to have too much cranberry juice. And skills that will then allow them to become more a part of society, right? It's one thing to just say juice. It's another thing to go to a restaurant when you're 5 years old and tell the waitress what you want on a menu.
Yeah.
So getting our kids to a point where they can actually function in society like they're typically developing peers does require more work. And the more behavior analysts lose sight of how much there is to teach, then unfortunately that's exactly what's happening to the science. It's getting watered down. And it's sad because we're losing a lot of our kids' potential.
Yeah. Yeah, it's devastating. We don't have very much time left. And I know there was something you wanted to come back to, but Sarah has just written in a question too. Sarah said, and Sarah's been with us for a long time with twins that have been just learning so much and growing so much. They're 6 years old now and have started school. And she says, long story, they're having some trouble with school. The school has recommended to move them into an alternative curriculum, which was obviously devastating. And Sarah, first of all, I just want to send you a hug. And then, of course, I think I certainly want to know more. Dr. Granpeesheh, do you want to know more? Or do you want to address that at all?
No, of course. We would love to be able to help Sarah in every way if we get more information on what's actually going on.
Yeah. She says currently at the top of their class in math, phonics, they love to learn. The reason that they gave was social deficits, which I agree that my view is that I want to support social development. I really would love to hear from you on this, Dr. Granpeesheh, because everything in me is like sick right now that I know that this is something schools do, that if the kids don't have the social component, they will slow down the curriculum component. As a former teacher, I am so opposed to that. But I want to hear from you.
It's terrible. No, it's absolutely right, because a lot of our kids are already strong to begin with on the academic side of things, because they just have that part of their brain is much more developed. I have so many kids who are academically stronger than your typical kids, and yet the social is difficult for them. And certainly, I think that it becomes very important. As I said, we kind of have to meet in the middle. It's not just about, the child learning appropriate social behavior. To a large extent, it is, right? But we can also modify the environment a little bit to be more welcoming of that, especially when it's in school, because that's the environment where our kids are supposed to learn social behavior.
Yeah.
So certainly, and what they do is when they modify the entire thing for the child, the experience becomes extremely boring and social behavior gets worse because the child is now completely bored even with content. So it's not a good solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
She says they need to be in mainstream, and she says they have completed the BB map except for social. This is a very empowering time of year for parents. Because you have a moment when, for most places, school is going to pause for a minute. And a lot of times school will say, they want them in their extended school year. And there are certain circumstances where that's a good thing, but that's review. And for our kids, I want to see them move forward. So what do you think, Dr. Granpeesheh? I want to encourage her to just
use the summer,
use this summer and social dip them in fun social, get real serious on working on skill building for social and doing it in real life and practice to get them caught up on that, because I would rather see them be in an accelerated class with a quicker curriculum with kids that are, doing that kind of thing than slow them down for the social.
Absolutely right. Yes. And they need support. And this is a very good time for you to be focusing on the social aspect of things and then going back with an advocate and kind of advocating for much better placements for them.
I fear that why they're pushing this, Sarah, is because they know what actually your children probably need is a one-to-one aid to help them in social circumstances, and they don't want to pay for that. But you can ask for a recreational aid assessment. Maybe they need an aid on the playground, but don't let them slow the social down. And I see you're thinking about homeschool, but if you do that, please have it be a homeschool where they have a drama program and things where your kids get together with people just for social things, so that you don't slow the social down. But I'm happy to talk with you. You can email me, Shannon@autism-line.com.
So I just want to add, so real quickly, I do want to go back to talking about this thing, Amikin's thing. So, about a year ago, I was introduced to a technology called Early Tech, and it's a technology. It's a system that that was developed at Emory Medical School and is right now being used in a few different places in the country. But Dr. Ami Klein is a big part of the science behind this thing. And what it is intended for screening and diagnosis. So it's sort of something that helps clinicians, because as we all know, it's very hard for people to get diagnosed, right? There's a backlog of diagnosis. But what this technology is that it's something they send it to you, and you basically will show various video to your child, who could be 1 year or 2 years, very young child, and it measures what your child is actually looking at, right? So it measures your child's eye tracking abilities and what they're looking at on the screen, and if they're looking at, let's say, the things that other typically developing kids look at, or if they're looking at other areas. And based on very, very sophisticated algorithms with extreme sensitivity and really good specificity, it's very valid, they're able to support a clinician's diagnosis by saying, yep, you're right on diagnosing this because this child has a pattern of looking at things in a different way, and sort of like as an individual with autism would. So it's supported technology for diagnostics. Now, when I saw it, I was just coming back to CARD and starting to really like engage and starting to fix everything at CARD. And at the same time, I knew that we need to open up separate business and clinics for diagnostics because it's still such a bottleneck across the country. But this time, so I asked Dr. Ami Clint to come back and present at ABAI because I do have an endowment where at ABAI every year they allow me to invite a physician, a medical doctor who will come and present on different areas so that we can have BCBAs be more open-minded and more look at the child as a whole. What I found really, really interesting was the way that he presented the early technology. And the fascinating thing that I loved so much was not just to look at it as a diagnostic assessment tool, but to recognize, and this is a lot of the research that they're doing now, and I want to get involved with this, to recognize that where we look really influences what we learn. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with regards to the things I learned about sensory input, right? And so a lot of their research is now focused on showing it's fascinating stuff, Shannon, you would love it. And they've done hundreds of kids, and they have a very big grant coming where they will be doing thousands of kids. And they're showing that kids who are later diagnosed tend to look at non-social aspects of the video. So they're not looking at the face. They're not looking at the eyes. They tend to be looking at other things in the picture, perhaps things that are repeating themselves or fluttering or shining or whatever it is. And so that makes perfect sense in regards to what they end up learning.
Yeah.
Because if they're focused on things that are non-social, like facial expression, later on, it's very, very foreign and uncomfortable to them. So, putting the whole diagnosis aside, to me, when he was presenting this the whole time, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if we get 1-year-olds and they're showing this pattern of where they're looking, and we actually focus on teaching them to look at social, look at the face, look at the eyes, just like other physically developing kids would that then alter the course of their later diagnosis?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that because it's just such a fascinating thing that they've come to realize.
I would love to have him come on the show too, Doreen.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes.
Let's arrange that. But that is absolutely fascinating. It was towards the end of Jen being at CARD that our dear Ev Kung spent some time with him, and she said, "Are you having some vision issues?" And I said, "Oh, are we?" I as a parent did not notice, but he went to a developmental ophthalmologist, and we found that there was a weakness in his eye that he could not focus on something directly in front of him, which is why he was looking out of the corner of his eye. That was the only place that his eye could go that it could focus. And when we got that piece together, game changer. It was amazing. And it showed up in school, but it also showed up in social things as well, as I think about it.
I think we're out of time, Shannon.
Oh, we are. We're totally out of time. I'm sorry. I'd keep you forever. But I know you have other things to go do. Thank you so much, Dr. Granpeesheh. We are back tomorrow with more shows, you guys. We're back and doing live shows, so don't miss that. We will look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Thank you, Dr. Granpeesheh, for everything.
Thank you.
And back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug for me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time.